They didn't just leave me in a hospital bed. They left me out of the family trip they'd been planning for months, booked with my money, and expected me to lie there in New York and never find out? They left me out of the family trip. So I left them out of my plans forever. Before I keep going, tell me something in the comments. Where are you watching from? Which city? Which country? I like to picture the living rooms and kitchen tables I'm sitting in when I tell these stories. My name is Helen, I'm 72 years old, and this is my true story from New York. I've lived in the same little brick house in Queens for almost 45 years. You know the kind, narrow front, 3 steps up, a small patch of yard that tries very hard to be a garden, and a view of the neighbor's laundry line instead of the skyline. If you stand on the stoop and squint, you can just see the elevated train rumble by at the end of the block. On summer nights, you hear sirens and ice cream trucks, and sometimes, when the wind is kind, the faint music from a park concert a few blocks away. My husband Tom and I bought that house when Queens was still the affordable borough. He worked as a mechanic in a shop under the tracks, and I spent 25 years behind a register at a grocery store on Roosevelt Avenue. We didn't have much, but we had a mortgage, a coffee pot that never quit, and a tiny backyard where Tom swore he could grow anything. He was wrong about the tomatoes and right about the roses. We raised our son Daniel in that house. His height is still marked in pencil on the kitchen doorframe, dates scribbled beside each notch in my handwriting. I kept his soccer trophies on a shelf above the radiator. When the blizzards came, we'd sit in the front room and watch the snow pile up on cars that didn't move for days. And Tom would say, "This house is our anchor, Helen. We pay it off. It'll take care of you when I can't." He died 12 years ago. Heart attack in the garage at work. They said it was quick. Grief was not. Grief came home with me and sat in his chair and slept on his pillow for years. But the house stayed. The pipes still clanged, the radiator still hissed, the number 7 train sighed in the distance. I learned to live with the quiet in new ways. Daniel was our only child. He moved out to Long Island in his 30s, married Lisa, sharp, pretty, always put together Lisa, and had 2 kids, Sophie and Max. I became a grandmother who rode the LIRR with Tupperware containers, always just in case the kids were hungry. I was on call for babysitting, school pickups, and sick day cartoons, and I was happy to do it. It's what you do when you love someone. What I didn't see at first was that somewhere along the way, they stopped seeing me as a woman who had built a life from scratch in this city and started seeing me as an old woman with a paid-off house and nothing better to do. You can feel that shift long before anyone says it out loud. It shows up in little comments. "Mom, you don't really need all that space. You should think about a condo." "Helen, it's crazy you still live here alone. You know how much a place like this is worth now." "You're lucky. You don't have real bills anymore. We're drowning out here." They said these things in the same tone they used to talk about subway delays and grocery prices, as if my life, my house, my money were part of the general public problem of New York. Then I had the stroke. It wasn't dramatic like in movies. I was standing at the sink, rinsing out a coffee mug, when my left hand simply stopped. The mug slipped. My tongue felt thick, like the words were trying to fight their way through cotton. The room tilted a little. I remember thinking, absurdly, "Don't break the mug, Tom liked this one," as it hit the sink. The next thing I really remember clearly is the beeping. Hospital beeping is different from clocks or microwaves. It's steady and indifferent, like it's counting something it doesn't care about. The room smelled like disinfectant and lemon. Light came through the blinds in stripes, and my left side felt like it belonged to a stranger. They told me I was lucky. Minor stroke, the neurologist said. We caught it fast. With therapy, you should regain almost everything. Lucky? It's a funny word to use when half your face won't obey you. The day after I was admitted, Daniel came. He sat in the plastic chair by the bed, stared at his phone, thumbed through a magazine he didn't read, and told me everything would be fine in a voice people use for traffic reports. He stayed 40 minutes. Lisa called once on speaker, cheerful and rushed, her voice full of, "We'll see what we can do," and "The kids have so much going on this week." After that, visiting hours were mostly just nurses, physical therapists, and the sounds of other people's families down the hall. My room was full of beeps and fluorescent hum and the scrape of food trays. I watched the hallway clock and started keeping time by who came and who didn't. On the third day, a nurse stuck her head in with a stack of envelopes. "You've got mail," she said. "Your neighbor, Mrs. Kendall, dropped it off. We put it at the desk." She smiled like this was proof I had people. I thanked her, watched the door shut again, and later asked another nurse to bring the stack in. Bills, flyers, a coupon booklet, nothing with Daniel's handwriting. That afternoon, while I lay there pretending to nap, I heard it. The nurse's station was just outside my door. The TV was low. My curtain wasn't fully pulled, and one of the younger nurses, the one with the bright sneakers, was telling another nurse about her upcoming trip. "We leave Saturday night," she said. "Red-eye to Paris, then Rome. I still can't believe we pulled it off. Whole family, kids and all. I'd lose my mind if I had to pay for all of it myself." "Must be nice," the other nurse said. "Who's funding that? A fairy godmother?" There was a laugh. "You kinda nailed it. My husband's mom is, house paid off in the city, pensions, the whole thing. She doesn't really spend it. Steven said it's better to use it while she's still here so she can see the kids happy. She doesn't need to come. She hates flying anyway." My heart started beating in my throat. Steven. That was Daniel's middle name. I listened harder, eyes closed, every nerve straining. "They didn't invite her?" the other nurse asked. "She's recovering from a stroke," the first one said, voice dropping. "What would she even do in Europe? Anyway, her card covers most of it. It's fine. Family money, family trip, right?" They laughed, soft and conspiratorial. I lay there under the thin hospital blanket and felt something in me go very, very still. They hadn't used our names, but they didn't have to. Daniel lives on Long Island. He works with a nurse's husband. He had been talking about a once-in-a-lifetime trip with the kids for months. Suddenly, their rushed phone calls made sense. "So busy this week. Next week is going to be crazy. We'll try to stop by before we go." Try. That was the word that landed hardest. If you're still with me at this point, listening from your own living room or maybe from a hospital bed, tell me in the comments if you've ever felt quietly left out of plans that your own effort helped pay for. You don't have to share details. Just a "yes" or "that's me" already tells me a lot. When they discharged me, they sent me home in a cab with a folder of instructions and a list of therapy appointments. The driver helped me up my own front steps because my son couldn't get away from work until later. The house smelled like itself. Faint cooking oil, old wood, laundry detergent. The porch light had been left on in the daytime. The plants on the windowsill were drooping. The mailbox was stuffed, the little metal door struggling to close, as if the mail itself had been trying to get someone's attention. I stood at the table, using my cane with one hand and holding the mail with the other. Bills, leaflets, a supermarket circular, and then 3 envelopes with my bank's logo. I set them down, feeling that prickle at the back of my neck you get when a storm is coming. The first statement I opened showed my usual balance. The second showed it thinner. The third was the one that made my hand shake. Flights from JFK to Paris, 4 tickets, a hotel in Rome, tickets to a museum in Florence, and more, a pre-trip shopping spree at a department store, a luggage store in Midtown, thousands of dollars, all in the last 10 days, all charged to my card. I checked the dates twice. Then I looked up at the calendar hanging on my fridge, the days I'd been in that hospital bed. I sat down hard in one of the kitchen chairs. The smallest sounds in the house suddenly seemed very loud. The tick of the clock, the fridge humming, a car passing outside. My heart hurt, not from the stroke, but from something older and sharper. It wasn't just that they had gone without me. It was that they had used what Tom and I had scraped together for 40 years and never thought they needed to ask. The easy thing would have been to cry until I was empty and then go back to pretending nothing was wrong. I'd been doing a version of that for years, wiping my eyes, putting on coffee, saying, "It's fine, sweetheart, I understand," when plans changed and holidays shrank. This time, I didn't do that. I took a notebook out of the drawer, yellow legal pad Tom had used for grocery lists and oil change notes. I wrote the date at the top. Then I started making 2 quiet columns in my head and on the page. On one side, I wrote down the big things I had done for them in the last 10 years, co-signing Daniel's car loan when his credit was bad, helping with their first down payment, covering a few months of daycare until we get back on our feet, standing in freezing bleachers at soccer games, cooking whole holiday meals alone, showing up whenever they called with, "Mom, can you?" On the other side, I wrote the things that had hurt. The Christmas they left early to go to Lisa's parents and didn't call until New Year's Eve, the Mother's Day rain check that never got cashed, the way Daniel had sighed when I asked for help with the air conditioner, the trip, the hospital, Paris. Line by line, the page filled up. It didn't make me feel better. It made me feel clear. Then I pulled every bank statement from the stack and went through them with a pen, circling every charge that was not mine. Airfare, hotels, restaurants in neighborhoods I hadn't been to in years. The total made my stomach twist. I could hear Tom's voice in my head, sitting at that same table years ago, teaching me how to read the fine print on a bank statement. Paper is proof, Helen. People can argue with feelings. They can't argue with dates and numbers. So I treated it like proof. I wrote each charge in my notebook with the date, place, and amount. I underlined the ones from the week of my stroke. By the time I was done, the page looked like a map of a trip I hadn't taken. The next morning, after barely sleeping, I called the bank. The woman on the line was polite in that trained way, the kind of tone that tries to sound warm but still keeps a barrier up. I explained everything, the stroke, the hospital stay, the dates, the charges I didn't make. She sighed softly through her teeth. "Ma'am, these were made with your card and PIN. They're technically authorized." I was lying in a hospital bed, I said. I couldn't even lift my left arm. Someone else had my wallet. There was a long pause on her side, the kind where a person wants to help, but also knows the limits of the script she's allowed to read from. "I can flag the account for investigation," she finally said. "But if a family member used it with your permission at any point, it becomes complicated." Complicated. I was sick of that word. Complicated was how people avoid saying the truth out loud. When I hung up, my hand went straight to a little scrap of paper stuck under a magnet on my fridge, a number a friend from church had given me months before. "If you ever need to put boundaries in writing," she'd said, "call this man. He helped my sister." I dialed. His office was in Jackson Heights, above a pharmacy, next to a place that did tax preparation in the off-season. The waiting room smelled like coffee and carpet cleaner. His receptionist greeted me like I was a person, not a fragile object. That alone almost made me cry. When I sat down with him, Mr. Ortega, gray hair, glasses sliding down his nose, I pushed the bank statements and my notebook across the desk. He read every line. He didn't rush. He didn't make that sympathetic face people make when they're already judging you. He just nodded. "You keep excellent records," he said. "That already puts you miles ahead. Now, tell me what you want." I didn't even have to think. I want to protect what I have left, and I want the rest of my life to belong to me, not to people who treat me like an ATM with a pulse. He folded his hands. "Then we update your will, change your power of attorney, redirect your estate, and we put clarity where there's been assumption." We talked for almost an hour. I told him about Tom, about the house, about Daniel and Lisa, about Paris, about the stroke, about the trip booked on my card while I lay half paralyzed under fluorescent lights. He listened the way people rarely do anymore, like every detail mattered. By the time I left his office, we had drafted a new will. My grandchildren would get the bulk someday. A portion would go to a shelter for older women, another to the neighborhood food pantry, and a scholarship fund for kids who didn't have someone to co-sign for anything. Daniel and Lisa would get memories, photos, sentimental things, nothing they could cash in. We revoked the old power of attorney with Daniel's name on it. That was the paper that hurt the most to sign, and the one that healed something in me the fastest. I walked out of that office feeling lighter than I had in years, lighter and steadier, like something inside me had finally stood up straight. That evening, I called a locksmith. He arrived with a tool bag that jingled like a small orchestra every time he moved. He changed the locks efficiently, without small talk, as if he instinctively understood that this wasn't just hardware, it was a boundary being built. When he handed me the new keys, cool metal against my palm, I felt something click into place inside my chest, too. I gave a spare key to my neighbor, Mrs. Kendall, who had been feeding my plants and bringing in my mail for years. Then I called my cousin Anna in the Bronx and gave her the other one. "Emergency access," I told them. "Only you two." That night, Lisa texted me a picture from the airport. The kids holding passports, suitcases neatly lined up, little typed hearts and plane emojis. "Send prayers. We'll bring something back from Paris." They had never once invited me. They had never even asked if I felt up to going. I put the phone face down. And then I left. Not to hide, not to disappear, but to separate myself from a life that had become nothing but taking. I rented a small apartment in a quiet Hudson River town, a place with a balcony big enough for one chair and a pot of basil, a place where the river's breath could soften the last hardness inside me, a place where no one knew me as the mother with the house, but simply as Helen. I packed one suitcase, a box of photos, my notebook, and Tom's old coffee mug. Before I walked out, I left an envelope on the kitchen table. Inside it were 3 things: the bank statements with all the Europe charges highlighted, the cover summary of my new will, and a letter. Not a furious letter, not the kind written through tears, a precise, steady letter. "Daniel and Lisa, I know about the trip. I know how it was paid for. I know exactly where I was while you were choosing hotels and museums. This is not about Paris. It is about years of taking without asking. Years of assuming I would make myself small so you could stretch your lives larger. I am safe. I am not confused. I am not lost. I have chosen to live where my life is respected. When you are ready to talk with honesty instead of expectation, you can reach out. Until then, take care of your family with what you earn. Mom." I placed it in the center of the table, the exact place Daniel always dumped his keys, so he wouldn't miss it. Then I locked the door, walked down those 3 little steps, and left the house Tom and I had built, Not because I stopped loving it, but because I needed to start loving myself. If you're still watching, tell me in the comments, have you ever had to walk away from people you loved just to save what was left of you? Your story might help someone who needs courage today. And this is where the real part of my story begins. I didn't expect peace to come quickly. Peace rarely does. But when I woke up that first morning in the little apartment overlooking the Hudson, something felt different. Not happiness, not relief, just quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't empty, but clean. The river moved steadily outside the window, wide and silver. I made coffee in Tom's old mug, sat on the balcony, and let the morning unfold without anyone needing anything from me. Meanwhile, back in Queens, they must have arrived home. I can imagine it as clearly as if I were standing in the doorway. Suitcases rolling along the walkway, kids complaining they were tired, Daniel pushing the key into the lock, and feeling it stop. He would have jiggled it, tried again and again, a little harder, then looked at Lisa. That first moment of confusion, before anger has time to bloom, that's where the truth begins to creep in. I wasn't there, but I've replayed the scene 100 times. The spare key from under the mat, gone. The back door, locked. The side gate, bolted. And then, inside, on the kitchen table, that envelope. I pictured Daniel opening it, his jaw tightening as his eyes moved down the highlighted charges. Paris, Rome, Florence, the boutique purchases, the hotel, the flights, and the dates circled again and again. The exact days I lay in a hospital bed struggling to lift my own hand. Then the summary of the will, then the letter. I don't know which part made their faces change first, the shock, the guilt, or the fear of what it all meant. What I do know is that they called me 12 times that afternoon. By the time I listened to the voicemails, the sun had set behind the river, and the water had turned black and reflective like a sheet of glass. "Mom, what is this? Call me back." "Helen, please, we need to talk." "This is insane. You can't just vanish." "We didn't mean anything by the trip." "You're misunderstanding." "Please, Mom, call us." That word again, misunderstanding. People always use it when they don't want to face the truth reflected back at them. If you've ever dealt with family who rewrite the story to make themselves feel better, you know exactly how those messages sounded. The next day and the next, the calls kept coming, sometimes angry, sometimes desperate, sometimes drenched in excuses. I didn't answer, not out of vengeance, but because silence is sometimes the only tool you have left when your voice has been ignored for too long. On the third day, the phone rang while I was standing at the balcony railing, watching a tugboat move slowly down the river. The sun was warm on my shoulders. For the first time in months, I didn't feel small. The caller ID said Daniel. I let it ring twice, 3 times, and then I answered. "Mom," he shouted the moment the line clicked. "Where are you? What are you doing? You scared us half to death." "I'm safe," I said calmly. "I'm exactly where I want to be." "You changed the locks? You changed the will? You left? You didn't tell us anything?" His voice wasn't just loud, it was panicked. The panic of someone who finally realized the consequences of their own choices. "You went to Europe without telling me," I said, "with my money, while I was in a hospital bed." "That was different," he said, too fast. "It always is," I answered. There was silence then, long and raw. Lisa got on the phone. Her voice was softer, shakier. "Helen, we didn't mean to hurt you. We just wanted the kids to have this experience. We thought you'd be fine. You always are." I let out a slow breath. That sentence alone explained everything. You always are.
Translation: we assumed you'd absorb the consequences.
You always do. Lisa, I said, you left me out of a family trip I paid for, and you left me alone in a hospital during a stroke. We didn't know it would sound like this, she whispered. But you knew what you were doing, I replied. For a moment, nobody spoke. Daniel broke the silence. So that's it? You're just leaving us out forever? No, I said gently. I'm leaving you out of my bank accounts, out of my decisions, out of the parts of my life where you only show up to take. I heard Lisa cry softly. Daniel's breathing was tight, uneven. We can fix this, he said. We'll pay you back. With what? I asked. With what you think you'll inherit, or with money you don't have? Another long silence. Sometimes silence says everything words avoid. I didn't do this to punish you, I said. I did it to protect myself. Then what do you want from us? Daniel asked, defeated. Respect, I answered. Consistency, and a relationship that isn't based on what you can get from me. I could feel them both absorbing it like a blow. And Mom, can we see you? Lisa asked. Not yet, I said. Not until you understand why this happened. I hung up before my voice could break. If you're watching this and you've been the one who always gave, always bent, always absorbed, tell me in the comments, do you think they would have ever changed if I hadn't finally walked away? Your answer might help someone who's scared to choose themselves. I didn't expect to hear from them again that night, but guilt has a way of keeping people awake, and by the next morning, my phone had 3 new messages, shorter, quieter, stripped of the anger that had filled the earlier ones. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to torture them, but because I finally understood something. When you give yourself away for long enough, silence becomes the first language of healing. Up the Hudson, my days settled into a slow, sturdy rhythm. Morning coffee on the balcony, physical therapy twice a week, a walk to the bakery where the woman behind the counter slipped an extra cookie into my bag and said, "You look stronger this week, Miss Helen." For the first time in years, people were kind to me without expecting anything in return. One afternoon, while I was folding laundry on the little table by the window, the phone rang again. I almost ignored it, but something made me look at the caller ID. It wasn't Daniel. It wasn't Lisa. It was Mrs. Kendall. For a moment, I felt my heart softened. "Helen, dear," she said the moment I answered. "They came by the house again. They look different this time, less angry, more lost." I sat down slowly. The river outside moved in long, steady ripples. "They asked if I knew where you were," she continued. "I told them you were safe, that you were doing what you needed. They asked if they could leave something for you." "What did they leave?" I asked softly. "Flowers," she said, "and a note. It just said, 'We're trying.'" I let the silence sit between us. Sometimes silence is forgiveness waiting for words. "If you want me to tell them anything," she added, "I will. Tell them I heard the message," I said, "and tell them I'm thinking." When I hung up the phone, I stood at the balcony railing a long time. The Hudson had that deep blue-gray color that looks like brushed steel, and the wind had picked up just enough to carry the scent of rain. For the first time since all of this began, I wondered, not about going back, but about whether they were capable of learning anything real from what had happened. That night, I fell asleep listening to the sound of boats in the distance. The next morning, a knock came at my door. It wasn't loud, not angry, not demanding, just a quiet, hesitant knock.
When I opened it, Daniel was standing there, holding a bouquet that looked like it had been chosen in a hurry, and Lisa stood slightly behind him, eyes red like she'd been crying more than sleeping. For a moment, none of us spoke. 3 people who once formed a family, standing at the threshold like strangers. "Mom," Daniel said, voice low, almost boyish, Can we talk, please?" Before I answered, I thought of something you, watching this, might understand deeply: the difference between letting someone back in and letting them walk all over you again. So I stepped aside, not fully, not warmly, just enough. They came in quietly, almost cautiously. Daniel looked around the apartment, taking in the thrift store furniture, the simple curtains, the view of the river. "It's nice," he said awkwardly. "It's peaceful," I corrected. Lisa sat down on one of the kitchen chairs, hands twisting in her lap. The silence stretched long enough to feel honest. Then Daniel exhaled hard and said, "We messed up." Not an excuse, not a justification, not a story about how busy they were or how stressed they'd been. Just that. "We messed up." Lisa nodded, tears gathering again. We thought you'd always be there. We never imagined you'd actually walk away." "That's the problem," I said softly. "You didn't imagine me as a person. You imagined me as a place you could return to." Lisa covered her mouth and started crying silently. Daniel put a hand on her shoulder, but didn't look away from me. "I'm not going to defend what we did," he continued. "I don't have a defense for it. I don't even know when it started, treating you like backup. But we see it now, and we see what it cost." The river moved quietly outside the window, and for a moment the entire room felt suspended between past and possibility. "I don't want your apologies," I said. "Apologies are easy. I want change." Daniel nodded. "We know. We're here to ask, not for forgiveness, but for a chance to earn something back, even if it takes years." I studied them carefully. 2 adults who had finally been forced to face the truth of themselves. "Why now?" I asked. "Why not before the trip?"
Before the hospital? Daniel swallowed hard. "Because I thought we had time. And then that letter on the table, it was like looking in a mirror I'd been avoiding for years." Lisa wiped her eyes. "And because we miss you. The kids miss you. They think you're mad at all of us." "I'm not mad," I said. "I'm done pretending." They nodded, both of them looking smaller, human in a way I hadn't seen in years. "If you want to rebuild something," I continued, "it won't be fast, it won't look like before, and it won't be on your terms." "On yours," Daniel said immediately, "whatever they are." "And if we mess up," Lisa added, "tell us. Don't carry it until it breaks." For a long moment, I let their words sit. They could be temporary. They could be real. There was no way to know yet. So I chose honesty. "You left me out of your trip," I said, "so I left you out of my future. What happens next depends on what you do, not on what you promise." Daniel's eyes filled, not with tears, but something deeper. And then, quietly, he asked, "Can we take you to lunch? Not to make up for anything, just to start somewhere." I hesitated, but I also thought of all the people watching this who've had to rebuild with someone they love, very slowly, very carefully, brick by brick. So I nodded once. "Lunch," I said, "somewhere simple." Lisa let out a breath she'd been holding. "Anywhere, you choose." "Diner down the street," I said. "Good soup, no expectations." Daniel smiled, small, cautious, grateful. "Diner it is." As we stepped out into the hallway, Lisa turned to me, voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for opening the door," she said.
even a little. I didn't say you're welcome. I didn't hug her. I didn't pretend things were healed. But I let the door swing closed behind us without locking it. If you've ever had to choose between protecting your peace and preserving a relationship, tell me below. Which one did you choose and why? Your story might help someone reading the comments right now. The diner was only 2 blocks from my building, a place with red vinyl booths and a bell over the door that jingled every time someone walked in. The kind of place where the waitress calls everyone hun, whether you're 7 or 70. I'd been there enough that week for her to remember how I take my tea. Daniel held the door for me, not as a son fulfilling a duty, but as a man trying to relearn something he should never have forgotten. Lisa slid into the booth across from me, smoothing her hair with hands that trembled just a little. None of us knew what to say at first, and maybe that was the most honest thing about the whole lunch. The waitress poured water and left us with menus we didn't really need. Silence filled the booth like a shy guest. Finally, Lisa cleared her throat and said, "We told the kids we were coming to see you. Sophie drew you a picture." She slid a folded paper across the table.
Crayon colors, a little house, a river, and a woman with silver hair standing on a balcony. Underneath it, in messy handwriting, "We miss you, Grandma." Something moved in me, something fragile and warm and still aching. I didn't unfold completely, but a small crack opened, enough for air. "She's a good artist," I said quietly. "She gets that from you," Daniel said, and the sincerity in his voice surprised me. Lunch wasn't a miracle. It wasn't redemption. It was just soup and sandwiches and 3 people learning how to speak without history, pulling every word backward. Daniel asked about my therapy. Lisa asked if I needed help with groceries. I said no to both, but I appreciated the asking. When we finished, Daniel pulled out his wallet to pay. I put my hand over his. "No," I said softly. "If this is a new beginning, let it start with you not assuming I'm here to cover the bill." He didn't argue. He nodded, quiet, humbled, and paid with his own card. Outside, the air was crisp and smelled faintly of the river. They walked me back to the building entrance. No pressure, no expectations, just presence. When we reached the door, Lisa wrapped her arms around herself and said, "We'll take whatever pace you set." "And we'll keep showing up," Daniel added. I believed him a little, not fully, but a little. Because sometimes the beginning of repair is not forgiveness, it's the absence of excuses. Days passed before I heard from them again, which was good. They weren't smothering me, and they weren't disappearing either. They sent photos of the kids doing homework, or a picture of a sunset from their yard, or a simple, "How was your day, Mom?" Nothing dramatic, just small, steady proof that they were trying. And slowly, the ache in my chest became something else. Not trust, not yet, but possibility. I kept volunteering at the pantry. I kept walking by the river. I kept drinking my morning coffee on the balcony where the breeze slipped through like a promise. People began to know me by name. Some mornings I woke up and didn't think about the hospital at all. About 2 months later, I got a letter in the mail. Not a bill, not a legal document, a handwritten envelope in Daniel's careful script. Inside was a single page. "Mom, we know we broke something precious. We're not asking you to pretend it didn't happen. We're asking for the chance to build something new, something we earn, not something we expect. We love you. We're learning. We're here." I sat at my table and traced the words with my thumb. Then I put the letter inside the same notebook where I had written every hurt. Not to erase what they'd done, but to remind myself that people can sometimes choose to grow in the cracks they created. Months went by. Seasons shifted. My hand grew steady again. My heart, too. And slowly,
The people who had once left me behind started showing up, not for grand gestures, but for the tiny, unglamorous moments that build real family.
Daniel visited on Tuesdays after work. Lisa called when she didn't need anything. The kids sent videos of their school projects. It wasn't perfect. It never will be. But it was something real, something earned, something mine to accept or not in my own time. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the river and the whole sky turned pink like a quiet apology, I realized something important. Leaving them out didn't destroy my family. It forced my family to choose whether they wanted to show up at all. And this time, they chose to. I still have boundaries. My locks are still new. My accounts are still protected. My will still reflects the truth of who showed up when it mattered. But there is room now, just enough for new beginnings that aren't built on sacrifice and silence. If you've lived any part of this story, if you've ever had to choose yourself after a lifetime of choosing others, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I read every one. And if this story touched you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that it is never too late to value your own worth. And before you go, make sure you subscribe to Mature Justice so you don't miss the next true story from women who finally chose themselves. You and we're building something stronger here, one story at a time.